I grew up in a small town in the Amazon, Brazil. I like to say that I grew up with good and evil at home. My mother was a loving, caring, faithful Christian woman. She was a true inspiration to me and my best friend. I followed her everywhere I could. She was my safe place. On the other hand, my father was an abusive alcoholic. He abused me as a child. I truly hated him and wished he could just disappear. When I was 14 years old, I left home to live with my older brother. At 15, I became pregnant with my first son and moved back into my parents' house. Shortly after I gave birth, my father tried to abuse me again, but this time I was older and strong enough to defend myself. I moved out when my son was 5 months old. I was a teenager, single mother, facing the world alone. I felt lonely and sometimes desperate, unable to provide for my child. But God had a plan, and I had a praying mother. I met a man, my first relationship. He welcomed me and my son into his family's home. A couple of years later, I became pregnant with my second son. That relationship did not last long. After our breakup, I had the opportunity to come to America. When I arrived in San Francisco, I was amazed by how alive and beautiful the city was. I entered a dance competition and won the San Francisco Carnival Queen title. I performed almost every night and was drawn deeply into the party scene. I began drinking, smoking, and using drugs. I developed an eating disorder and a strong addiction to marijuana. I was the main attraction everywhere I performed, but at the end of the night, when I packed my dance costume into my car and drove home, I felt empty, unhappy, and spiritually dead. In 2011, while on vacation in Las Vegas with friends, I met my husband. After 2 years of dating, I moved to San Diego and we got married. Soon after, I discovered that my husband was an atheist and an alcoholic. After he left the Marines, we opened a performing arts school. Despite our success, my marriage was broken and headed to divorce. I was exhausted by my husband drinking and blackouts. One day, during our final argument on a bridge, I looked at him and said, "You are never going to change. I am done." He looked at me and said, "But I really want to change." He fell to his knee and wept like a baby. For the next 3 days, he could barely walk, talk, or eat. He declared that we're going to close the dance school. I was worried and confused, not to understand what God was doing. God first had to break the atheist man and turn him into a believer. We closed our school, moved to Michigan, and worked there for a couple of years. That is when God worked a miracle in my life, but not before I endured trials. I experienced 4 miscarriages of 2.5 years. In 2021, we moved to Pensacola and began attending Generational Church. I joined 21 Days of Prayer, waking up at 5 a.m. to pray and worship before work, then watch sermons online at night. I was hungry to truly know Jesus and have a real relationship with Him. During the 21 Days of Prayer, I was water baptized at church, and that public declaration of my faith was a turning point in my walk with God as I chose to truly surrender my life to Jesus. I began watching videos of God moving power, healing, and delivering people, and I believe He could do the same for me. I was sitting on my couch watching a revival preacher online. He asked people to type in the chat what they needed for prayer. I typed infertility. The evangelist said, "I want to pray for this lady, Rebeca." I screamed to my husband, "That's me!" He prayed and commanded my womb to open, saying, "Rebeca, God says when you get pregnant, you will not miscarry." I felt my entire body grow warm and I began to sweat. I had received my healing. 1 month later, I became pregnant. Today, she is a beautiful 3.5 years old girl. And God also blessed us with a son and a healthy, beautiful family. Since then, I have been baptized by the Holy Spirit, and I received the gift of speaking tongues. I have been completely sober for 5 years. I have been delivered and free from infertility, addiction, lust, and unforgiveness. And yes, I forgave my father. Before he died, I returned to Brazil, looked him in the eye, and I told him, I forgive you, and gave him a hug. God took a story that began in abuse, fear, and brokenness, and redeemed it with healing, freedom, and restoration. This is what Jesus does. He makes all things new. My name is Rebeca, Athey, and I am a member of Generation Church.